This is the Merdeka Award Roundtable, and earlier before the break we're talking about sports that we Malaysians do well, perhaps with the limited resources that we have, allocation for funding for sports. Perhaps it's time for us to take a look at what we really truly do well, focus on those core sports and let go maybe some that we do not do too well.
I can't say I can't choose those sports because if not, I'll be killed by my membership of the Olympic Council of Malaysia, where we have over 45 sports. But certainly there are some sports where we know that Malaysia can really do well, can really get those gold medals that we're really looking for, and that's all to do with the science, the physiology. It's obvious that the games of skill, we are very good at. Your badmintons, your archery, hockey, are all football, are all games of skill. Games where you need a huge height. Maybe we're not ever going to beat the All Blacks, for instance, at rugby, or the some of these huge basketballers.
Let's talk from the commercial viability perspective. Sports in Malaysia, where are the opportunities?
I think we said it earlier already. Football is by far the #1 sport, and therefore the opportunities in football are probably the largest. It's funny when you talk to people in an office. There's a lot of talk about the Premier League and the international football, but I know, because I've seen the statistics, the ratings for local football is much bigger in most cases than the ratings for international football. If you ask the average person wouldn't believe you that a Premier League match gets a lower rating than a match where Selangor plays Pahang, for example. So I think that's where there is still a lack of education within sponsorship in other areas, that local football actually is big. It is a true mass sport. There are 30,000-40,000 people in the stadiums across the country on every weekend. So to me, the football sport as an industry, the league as an industry has still a long way to go, and there's massive opportunities for brands and people to work in it, as well as, of course, for athletes to continue to grow. The Malaysian Football League isn't the pinnacle of football, naturally, but it is a great stepping stone to the next level above it. So there's a lot of things which you can do in football. Badminton is the other no-brainer. Squash, I think, globally is a very niche sport, so it's hard to really say, how much you want to continue that, and is there a legacy beyond Nicole, I guess, right?
How to do that? That's the problem, is that giving money, yes, but the whole structure of it, the finding talent, the development, the culture, to educate people. I remember the time that when Formula 1 came to Malaysia was back in 1999. The first job at that time by the station that I worked for, to educate people on the sports, that people understand. If not, you were watching the race, the car go round and round every week. Nobody going to be interested, and there's no Malaysian drivers in there as well. But to understand the sport first, the money must be in the sports, and to not only for the sport itself, but is across the board of understanding the sports. Yeah.
Dr. Wirdati, how do you see sports as a potential generating revenue? Because in some countries, sports is seen as a financial liability. We keep increasing public funds into development of sports, but are we getting that kind of results that we want?
Well, I think to answer that, I will pick up from the responses that I had heard from the panels today, and it will go back to football again. It is an undisputed fact that sports can actually bring money. A research done by the Ministry of Youth and Sports, the Sterling report done by a university in Scotland looking at the kind of income that sports can bring is staggering. It ranges from 9 billion ringgit Malaysia to 35 billion. So it's in the billions. And that is where potential for new revenue generation sector that Malaysia is looking for would probably lie. So I think there is a huge potential in that. And I think to select the kind of sports that we wanted to promote would be counterproductive in terms of we need icons for this country. We need people that inspire us to keep us moving. I mean, beyond Nicole, we need to find another icon, or maybe icons in another sport. This is what drives the Malaysian spirit forward. So I think in terms of investing in sports, if it comes from the government, yes, we are quite aware of the condition of the world economy at this stage. But sport is something that you might have to invest even though you're losing. For example, I'm involved with a study done by the National Sports Council to see, a study on behalf of Malaysia, to see whether or not ASEAN would be able to host the 2034 FIFA World Cup. And the overarching idea was we are not going to be able to do it as a region because of the financial implications. But think about the kind of interest or the kind of ideas and publicity that the region could generate. And definitely there will be only 3 countries that will be highlighted in that. It will be Malaysia, Thailand, and also Indonesia. So these are the kind of considerations that policymakers would have to consider. They will lose out money, but how will that affect the social aspect of sport? Will be,
It's an investment, actually. I wouldn't say losing.
Yeah.
I would say it's truly an investment in the future. Whether it's the SEA Games, which we'll talk about later, or those large sporting events, they really change the perception of sports for the uneducated, let's put it this way, right? Someone who's really just watching it by chance, they get inspired because this is the first time they've had a chance to see this live maybe, or be in the stadium, and bringing the World Cup here, again, would clearly make, it's a financial burden in a sense, but I think the investment in the future of the sport and in general, it'd be huge.
On its own, just a money return on the investment. It's not that way. I think you have to look at it holistically. Even everyone says that Formula One, what a lot of money to spend, etc., etc., etc. But look at it from the tourism point of view. Look at it from the, how many times Kuala Lumpur is mentioned, even though the KL Grand Prix, Malaysian, it's happened months before. They're still talking about an incident, and that happened here many, months ago. So I think it's, it's difficult to quantify the, investment, and therefore it is also difficult to say what one should be looking into. I mean, I must defend squash, because I was the first secretary of squash, and I started the Squash Association. But yes, I think Marcus is right. It's not a mainstream sport, but nevertheless, it is a sport that has its importance in the sense that it's in the Commonwealth Games, it's in the Asian Games. We're still one of the top nations. You can't just let it go, and there's not a lot of money you need to put into squash. Squash and football is like, chalk and cheese. I mean, you need to just support a little bit of squash. Whereas, in football, you have to have multi-pronged support because no one party can do it.
Because football needs not only the president or the owner, it needs to work from the owner right to the groundsman. So everybody is playing a very important role. Even if the groundsman doesn't look after the field well, it's going to jeopardize the performance. So everybody play a part in it. So it's a huge things that you have to think about. Like what Tuanku said, probably squash, you less headache, yeah, with the terms of in a way of management arranging things. But in football, there's a lot of aspect that you have to look at.
We have to go for our last commercial break, but when we come back, let's talk about the SEA Games. This is an exciting event happening here in Malaysia, and what are the opportunities and what are our aspirations after the break.